We are about to get started here. Apologies, I'm starting just a little bit late. I don't always run the webinars, so I was trying to find the right button here. But we're here. Welcome to our session today. This is our field guide on testing. My name is Jake Love. I'm a senior solutions architect here. I'm joined by Brittany Smart, who is a solutions engineer who's also doing some work on our product team now, kind of multifaceted specialist here. We're excited to talk about testing. Um, let's see here. We've seen our customers do a number of different kinds of tests, especially in the realm of design systems. They come up a lot. We've seen things like visual regression testing, component testing, end-to-end testing, unit testing, accessibility testing, and there's probably other ones out there. The stacks of technology that teams have been using to accomplish these are really from two different suites of tools. We see Jest a lot, probably about 80% we see Jest. And then, of course, we also see Cypress. And Jest is really great for doing things fast and providing a lot of coverage on your code base, unit tests, testing smaller chunks of code. And Cypress is really great at excelling at real world workflows, running through different types of your apps, doing things that actually result in real network requests through real browser connections. Again, the split we a lot of times see when teams are really getting into testing is probably 80% Jest with 20% being more on the Cypress end of things. That being the case, we're not going to get too deep into the mechanics of how to write Jest tests per se or Cypress tests, but we are going to show some documentation that we have created and some helper tools that are in our docs as well. To get started, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to just kind of take a look at a few things here. Okay, can anyone see my code? My code here. Brett, you see my code? Yeah.
Yep,
Okay, cool.
looks good.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a Knapsack workspace, and we're going to look at some files here, and then we're also going to go back to the browser and kind of take a look at sort of where these things originate. On the left-hand side, we see a Cypress test for a button, and then on the right, we see a Jest test for an author component. And one of the things that I really want to talk about is how Knapsack can be an endpoint for your testing. Especially in regards to the Cypress world, where we're looking at URLs, we're visiting isolated component renders, and then we're able to attach our tests to that accordingly. When we open up Knapsack and we're working locally, we can take a peek at components, right? And if we find our button component, let's go ahead and see this. We can go ahead and then run our tests through this. Now, what's really great about being able to use your actual demos that are from your design system is that this is what sort of democratizes the creation and the curation, really, of your tests that you'll be using. And so we've seen teams create their own workflows where they've got a primary and a secondary example, and maybe they have a bunch of other ones too that are for various cases. But the primary and the secondary are the known cases that the tests should be passing on. And so anytime there's a component that's got a primary and a secondary example, those teams have created tests for them. And so we kind of know that these match, what the designs are looking for, they match the brand, and this is what should pass in terms of what is solid for our brand. And so we can use these isolated views, right? So we can get this isolated view here, even without the Knapsack UI here, and we'll talk about that in a minute, to be able to pass into your tools that accept browser URLs. I guess I don't know where URLs go other than browsers, browser URLs. We'll kind of cover that here in a second. But again, the real thing that's to drive home here is that you can have other team members beyond just engineers that are maybe writing these tests, preparing the assets and the artifacts for those tests themselves.
So Jake, real quick.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at is just somebody on the team connected one of our components to Knapsack, which just means Knapsack, we told Knapsack where the button is, and Knapsack is just rendering it. And then from there, anybody can start making different remixes, right, of the button, different variations. And I think what you're saying is what Knapsack will do is actually take those different variations, generate a URL that we can then take and do some cool stuff with.
Yep. That's it exactly. Yep, exactly. Being that endpoint.
Cool.
Um, Now, to
Hmm.
make things simpler, Knapsack has a dist directory wherever your knapsack is configured, right? And you'll actually see where the dist is inside your knapsack config. This dist writes a meta directory, and inside that meta directory is a KS meta JSON file. Now, this file, I'm actually going to use this nice little viewer here that Britt showed me the other day. This file contains all of the pattern data for your entire workspace. Oh, that's getting kind of hard to see. This means that it includes basically every single pattern against every single asset set, which is how a lot of teams are doing themes, and every single variation. And that's pretty powerful because it's essentially a database that we can query, that we can get all the information we need to be able to pass into various kinds of tools. This is obviously beyond just doing testing, but specifically for testing, this is incredibly powerful. Because if we know what our pattern ID is, this one's kind of an interesting one with this little hash at the end there. But if we know what our pattern ID is, we know that it's our React templates. We can be able to get this information, especially with the demo ID, and be able to render that. And so when we take a peek at things like our Cypress tests, I had written this utility function, KS demo, and this handles a lot of the going out and hunting and looking for URLs or trying to find various things. And so this function itself, obviously, it's relative to where your KS meta file is. We'll actually go through and it will grab uh, the button component, right? That's the first parameter in here. We pass in our React template, and then we pass in the specific demo we want. And so from there, we're able to access the exact demo, the exact pattern that we were using, and then we can, of course, do the testing from there. And so we've got our button here, and if we wanted to run that in our Cypress tests, which we've got here, there's a couple options. There's a command line option where you can just run it just straight from the command line, which is great for CI/CD implementations. It's great for a number of other options where you just want to be able to run that and just kind of get the result from it right away, which is pretty great. Let's close that up so it looks a little bit prettier. There we go. And then another thing that's really great, another reason why it's become pretty popular with a lot of teams is because it provides some out of the box utilities that provide some graphical user interfaces. And so if we end up running this command, which I have it, oops, I have a alias for this, so there's actually a different Cypress command specifically, but it opens up our demo test here, and then you can see that there are specs, runs, there's all kinds of options that are available to you. And if you wanted to, you could jump right in and just run those tests right here. And you see, here's that endpoint we were talking about that is, again, fulfilled just from having that helper function that we added, this thing right here, KS demo. And that's what allows us to be able to pull that open right here. And again, that's the same button that we were using. So really powerful stuff, right? Again, we're not going to go too deep into the specifics of how to write the specific tests in Cypress, but enough to say that if you add this KS demo function, we've added it under, I believe, the support. Yeah. So Cypress creates a directory. It comes with a support directory where there's some commands, some E2E commands. We added a knapsack TS file, and then here's that helper function that we added. And so that's, in a nutshell, how to quickly integrate Cypress, the demos that have been created, so that way they can be tested, and just kind of weave all that stuff together into one spot, which is pretty powerful. Now, when we get into the Jest end of things, I'm going to close this so we don't need the additional server running there. Now that we got into the Jest end of things, Jest does not need a URL. So here, let's close this. Jest can actually load the components locally. And so if you've got your components that you're building within your workspace, let's see, let's ignore that Cypress crash before. Then you can actually create this author.test.tsx or pretty much any other component you've got in here, iconviewer.test.txx. We add our Jest configurations. We don't have a helper function that we've authored for Jest just because Jest is really extensible. You can do a lot of things with Jest, but the most common use case is to have that test right next to your component file itself, right? Import that in and then create whatever specific test that makes the best sense for that kind of tool, whether it's a unit test, functional tests. You can do component tests, all kinds of things right in here. Now, what's really great about author, or no, sorry, author test, what's really great about Jest tests is that for engineers specifically, there's certain cases where you might have a more advanced component where multiple properties need to be set. Maybe it's reliant on having specific subcomponents being nested within it. And the result of not having that in there maybe causes some issues or has caused an issue if you're doing some kind of test-driven development process. So in that case, you can create these tests in here that not only just does it render, can I click the button, right? You can actually, set the wrong properties and then see how your errors are then handled, right? Does it crash the app completely? Does it gracefully degrade into a better experience? And so a lot of times we've seen teams when some component has had a bug, if it's a weird bug or whether it's something that, is based on user error, they add a test for it to verify that this can be handled gracefully and that it's not going to continue to crash downstream tools. This can also be really handy if you've got libraries where you're doing your styling inside of your JavaScript. And this is because some of these libraries, they don't necessarily throw an error during the development process if a variable is missing. But once that's released into a package, an npm package, it's pulled downstream. Those teams have seen build failures where, they go to run their app after installing a new version of their npm package and they get a crash. And the reason they got a crash is because there was a variable that was not included that in development mode was fine, but in production mode ended up throwing some issues. And so, being able to create tests like this, where you can basically test those with either bad values or incomplete data or however you'd like to do it to make sure that you can catch those errors early in the CI world. That prevents that code from ever being merged in the first place. Meaning that if you're failing these tests, those pull requests cannot get merged in. Therefore, it provides a really solid gate. So that way your code, when it gets out and goes downstream, is reliable. And your downstream teams feel good about using the design system. So the last thing you want to do is to spend all this time building a design system, building all your code just to release it for, a bug to trigger some crash, and then a bunch of teams just don't want to use it anymore because, that can happen, right? People are trying to get their work done and take care of their jobs, and if a tool starts to sort of hinder that process, it's easy to blame the tool. So we want to prevent that. So that being the case with Jest, we can then run our tests with Jest. So let's do a npm run, Jest test here. And we can see we've got our passing test. Again, pretty simple. It's just going through and making sure that we've got certain text is visible, and that these things are available. Again, these can be quite extensive. They can also be fairly simple. We've also worked with customers where this process of writing this test and this render and this expects, gets a little bit tedious for those teams. And so for those teams, they've created helper functions that do some of the exact things that they do frequently, but in the terms of something that could be scaled and something that could be just called out with a function. In fact, because Knapsack is in a data directory and there's all this JSON that's available for the pattern pages, we've even seen teams, write things that pull into the data directory, grab all the props for a specific component, see if they've got any enums, right? Thing like multiple options that could be enumerated over, and then they just do the loop and they run through each one of those tests. And so then the lines for, writing a test for each one of their variations for each one of the options that are available for that component, rather than being, hundreds of lines, is like 5 lines or 6 lines. And so it can be streamlined quite a bit, which is pretty great. And of course, all of these things can come together. You can have both of these things all in the same system. Oops, I need that server running. And once you have them there, you can chain all of these things together with a test command. So we can do npm run test. Close this, and then we'll see that, we can run our Jest tests, then we can run our Cypress tests. We can kind of get all these things in line. And of course, if during our CI/CD process in our pull requests, there is after the build, we have the npm run test command, and this has to run. This is where that mechanism sort of meets, where if the VRT tests fail, if the unit tests fail, if any of our tests fail, that pull request gets a big red circle with the X on it, and then it has to be fixed before it can go in. So pretty powerful stuff. And again, this is where, taking your design system to the next level, bringing it to a place where it cannot just be scaled, but also can be trusted downstream is pretty big. So We have some docs in here. We have our Cypress testing doc. We don't have a Jest testing doc just yet, mostly because, well, Jest is fairly simple. You install it, you have your configuration, then you run it. It looks for the files in your directories, and you're off to the races. But Cypress is a little bit more here, but especially this tester function, which I think is pretty robust and uh, does the aspect of you of having, or does the aspect for you of having to look up these URLs to be able to use them in your demos. So I'm gonna grab this. I'm gonna put this in our chat, and I guess we could probably at this point see if there are any questions that anyone has. Kind of a quick content session, but that's because we provide some robust tools that allow you to do these things fairly simply.
What about as far as speed, Jake? Like is one or Cypress test going to be slower because they're like reaching into the browser, like basically running a browser under the hood,
Yep. Yeah, that's a good
versus
call.
just
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. Cypress, because it's involving with like real network calls, it does require a browser. Even in that little test app that we saw there, that was an Electron app. And so because there
Mhm.
are, services involved in browsers and different packages, right? It just does take a little bit longer.
Yeah,
It's a heavier process for sure. Jest is
right.
quick, very fast. And again, if you're doing things just for unit tests, like verifying certain small functions and helper functions work, that's really fast.
Hmm.
So good question.
Yep.
Ooh, looks like we got a
Looks like we got
question
one
for
from Bill.
Bill. Yeah. Do you have any recommendations on accessibility testing? So there is a accessibility test for I think both Jest and for Cypress. There's an Axe library that I believe a lot of teams have used. It's been pretty good. It's been a little while since I've touched it, but I believe that the Cypress and Axe is one of the ways that teams have been doing this for a while. That works pretty well actually. In fact, give me one question or one quick second here. Do,
Yeah, and those
do.
accessibility tests are another thing that could get incorporated to your CI/CD so that you're making sure things are getting merged that are inaccessible, especially if you have
Cypress Axe. Yep.
strict guidelines around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge benefit there.
Yeah. So this, I think that's what you're talking about. This guy, right? Cypress accessibility testing. Yeah, it's called, yes, Cypress Axe. There it is.
Mm.
This is, I think, the package that most teams are using for that accessibility. And again, like I said, it's been a little while since I've touched this, but I know that it's very configurable, right? Similar stuff. Visit this thing, check to make sure that the stuff passes our accessibility tests. But this is how you would essentially do that. And that's kind of where I was saying is that the testing kind of comes down to these two libraries. Jest and Cypress is what we see the most, and between the two, that's sort of where you get all of this coverage. For example, visual regression testing, I think is most often carried out using Jest, but you can do it with Cypress. And Cypress, I believe, with the premium account, also provides video recording as well. So in a design system, when you're doing component level testing, that's maybe less important unless you've got like, a very complex component that is a workhorse that handles everything that has to make real queries and all kinds of stuff. Then I think maybe that would make more
Mhm.
sense. But, um, you know,
Yeah.
for the most part, I think, when you're going to be doing accessibility or sorry, like something like a visual regression testing, I think you're going to be using tools like Jest for that. Um, and again, this Cypress X has come up a lot. I know a lot of teams are using it. Put this in the chat as well.
Mhm. And yeah,
Oops.
Cypress is also good for just testing like user flows, which is, you need an actual browser to test these things. So, yeah, you want to make sure you write those in, using Cypress. They could be like a, checkout flow or something like that. Um, things that are chained together. Whereas, yeah, Jest is more like Jake said, unit testing like component logic or like functions. And they're like super quick.
Yeah, and then with Cypress, like you're saying, I mean, if you had, a prototype of some kind of a, experience like you see it here where it's almost like a full app, that's where you can then write it to be like, hey, load this up. You should see this logo.
Mhm.
Click the logo. You should see this element appear. And so you really get that whole like network call requests and the real life, I guess, walking through of the content versus just the, quick run through in JavaScript in a node environment. Pretty powerful stuff. Great question there, Bill, and great questions there, Brett. Let's see. What are the questions we might have? Anything else that any burning questions for anyone else on the call here? We are planning to do sort of a follow up on a maybe more advanced version of this here in the future, where we talk about pulling these things together potentially in like a dashboard or something like that. So, um,
Yeah. Would you want to run through the slides maybe just to have the
oh,
contact info in case
that's
people have
probably a good
questions?
call. Yeah, here, let's do
Oh,
this.
one of those.
All right. I probably should have started off with this one. This is where I was saying that Andrew usually runs these guys, so
You're
a
you're
little
too
bit
excited. You just
too
need to
excited.
get into
Yeah,
the
just try to
code.
get
Yeah.
meat too fast. But here we go. So yeah, August 13th, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Obviously we're past this time here, but this is integrating Knapsack into testing workflows. Let's see. We have there you go. This is a good one to come up. September 10th, unifying cross-platform systems using Knapsack to support email channels. Ooh, that'll be fun. I believe this one's probably going to have a combination of HTML renderer and handlebars renderer for anyone else that is out there and curious. Also, to note that anyone on these calls, if there is a topic that you're super interested in hearing, that maybe we haven't covered yet, or maybe we didn't cover in extensive details, feel free to drop something in the chat or just send us a message. Help at knapsack. Actually, probably not help. Hello at knapsack.cloud. Probably don't need a support ticket for that. So help at knapsack.cloud will get you a support ticket. And then let's see here. What else we got? We got Patterns Leadership Summit. There you go. Here's a nice plug. We got some events coming up here. So if there's anyone in your team, especially the leadership side of things, that are interested in getting deeper into, you know, the various aspects of design systems, whether that is, the implementation, the creation, the rebuilding, therapy. There's a lot of these sessions we've heard is very therapeutic for a lot of teams. Um, but this is obviously see we have some really great speakers lined up. There's always some fantastic talent that's available there, and so take a snapshot of these events. If you got someone that's going to be in one of these cities for these events, please reach out. Let us know. We'd love to be able to connect you with the right people to get you there. And of course, here's some great images of some fantastic speakers. Britt, are we actually wearing these blue shirts too? So right now, I
I
think
know we're
I
blue.
think we
We're
might
blue
have
out.
accidentally. I don't have my purple background, but this is Brittany and there's me. So uh, these were the points we hit. So we automated testing and tooling. Hey, I guess this is the tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Right? I guess out of order here,
There we
right?
go.
Automated testing and tooling. So we talked about Cypress and Jest, right? Cypress being sort of the much more beefy option that teams use for the real life experiences, the real life browser calls. Jest for those quick tasks that are able to just take care of things from unit tests all the way to things like visual regression testing. We talked about the various types of testing. We didn't go super deep into each one of them and what they are specifically, but they're fairly known concepts. And so, if there's any gray area there, please let us know. We can then, go over these again. We talked about Knapsack as a testing endpoint with that isolated URL patterns that we were seeing, specifically with that KS meta JSON file. Obviously, the helper function we wrote for Cypress is sort of what bakes all this stuff in and kind of helps you that. And then, of course, we did our live demonstration, and here we are in our QA. So, live demo. We did the live
We
demo, and
made
here
it.
we are. So, yeah, I think this is sort of what I've got. Any other
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
questions that? Sorry, go ahead. What's up, Brett?
Oh no, that was a great overview and just really cool to kind of see how you can leverage Knapsack as not just like a design system platform, like in the way that it's an actual database that you have like data you can test against, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. This is a great way to include more in your design system than just the patterns, the tokens, the designs, also including the tests. So pretty awesome stuff. If anything during this call is of interest to anyone on the team, by the way, and anyone would like to dive into these things a little bit deeper, maybe you have some nuanced situations in your own organization that you'd like to talk about, please reach out. We'd be happy to talk through some of this stuff. We can always jump on a quick dev session for some of this to be able to walk through some of the connection of these utilities and sort of point out where you can find different things like the meta file and the helper functions and all those kind of things. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please reach out if you have any questions or if you have any ideas for some future sessions. And we look forward to seeing you out there. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.